my goal is to destroy the New York Times and CNN. I always thought that we could be their friends, and I'm talking not just them or New York, that they would take our criticism and our acting as their checks and balances, the fifth estate on the fourth estate, and that they would correct themselves, that they would become better citizens. They've chosen not to go that route, and I really believe, and I'm committed to, the destruction of the old media guard. And it's a very good business model, but I believe that from that something better will come, because nothing could be better than a group of people that collectively sneer, think that it's an obvious joke that when people want to have redress for their grievances, that they're called teabaggers, and everybody has a great laugh at it. That we have to defend ourselves for having this conversation is despicable. The media class is the wall that we have to climb over in order for our voices to be heard. Once our voices are heard, then democracy will happen.
Thank you.
Don't mess with Texas.
I come here today to speak plainly about the times that we live in. At no time in the last 25 years has the future been more uncertain and the world more dangerous than it is today. On 3 points, we must be clear. First, our country has entered a time of testing, and our political leadership is failing the test. The American people see a president who bows to political correctness, in denial of the threats that we face, making grave miscalculations that make the world less safe. Now, this administration's incompetence in Iraq and Syria have allowed the emergence of ISIS. They're in American tanks, they're using American weapons, and ISIS began taking cities that just a few years ago were secured by American blood. Now let's be very, very clear about who ISIS is, what they represent. They are a religious movement that seeks to take the world back to the 7th century. Their aims are apocalyptic. They mean to cleanse the world, not just of Christians and Jews, but of Muslims who disagree with their extreme ideology. And it is their stated vow to kill as many Americans as possible. It's time. It is time for the American people to hear the truth. The President declared in the State of the Union that the advance of ISIS has been stopped, and that is simply not true. He says that ISIS is a religious movement. Again, he's simply wrong. To deny the fundamental religious nature of the threat and to downplay the seriousness of it is naive, it is dangerous, and it is misguided. ISIS represents the worst threat to freedom since communism. If Egypt and Jordan recognize that they are at war with radical Islam, isn't it about time our president proclaimed the same? We didn't start this war, nor did we choose it, but we will have the will to finish it. Now let me state another obvious fact about the Middle East. It is not in the interest of peace and security of the free world that Iran be allowed to develop nuclear weapons. Reports concerning this bilateral negotiation between the United States and Iran indicate a deal on the table would allow Iran to develop nuclear power after a certain number of years if they live up to certain treaty obligations. I believe it is fundamentally dangerous to grant Iran's nuclear ambitions diplomatic cover. Our discussions with Iran should be governed by two non-negotiable principles. Number one is Iran should not be allowed to develop nuclear weapons, period. And number two, Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state. Yeah, amen. It's time. It's time we stood with the most vibrant democracy in the Middle East. The administration's policy of isolating Israel must stop. You know, watching all of this unfold is the president of Russia. He's been watching as our president drew a line, a red line in Syria that was crossed without consequence. And then this Russian president watched as our president canceled plans to deploy missile systems in Poland and the Czech Republic. And it was against this backdrop of weakness and empty words that Putin annexed Crimea. He entered Ukraine. And it was those conditions that allowed him to negotiate a one-sided ceasefire at Minsk with no real consequences. Here's the simple truth about our foreign policy. Our allies doubt us, and our adversaries are all too willing to test us. No one should be surprised. No one should be surprised that dictators like Assad would cross the president's red line because he knows the president won't even defend the line that separates our nation from Mexico. There aren't any real consequences. There are no real consequences when dictators and adversaries defy America, and this must change. For the world to be safer, America must be stronger. And for America to be safer, our border must be secure. Drug cartels, transnational gangs, they smuggle drugs and weapons and people. They are a clear and present danger to the health and the safety of all Americans. Any conversation about comprehensive immigration reform must begin with comprehensive border security. And that's exactly why. Last summer I told the president, looked him right in the eye, and I said, if you will not secure the border between Texas and Mexico, Texas will. So here's the second point, and I want to be very clear today. The conservative movement must be a great agent of reform. To lead this country, we must offer a vision of change. Our nation is $18 trillion in debt. So every agency of government, every department out there, they must account for every dime that they spend. For the first time in American history, a generation of leaders is on the verge of breaking the social compact with the next generation. And that is to leave a better country and with greater opportunity than the way we found it. With debt the size of our GDP, our nation's involved with generational theft. There are fewer of us that believe in the American dream than any time in the last 20 years. For middle-class Americans, opportunity and security has been replaced with anxiety and worry. Out-of-pocket health care costs, housing, college tuition, they've all gone up faster than wages. Student debt is at an all-time high, and this has to change. It is time. It is time to restore hope and opportunity to the middle-class Americans out there. And we can start with our tax code. We've got the highest corporate tax rate in the Western world. And it is time to lower that corporate tax rate to lift up middle-class wages. We can do this. It is time to provide easier access to credit for small businesses. These lending reforms are squeezing our community banks and our small businesses. It is time to bring jobs and prosperity to Main Street, not just Wall Street. And it's time. It's time to stop this overregulation by runaway federal agencies. That you realize the regulatory cost, this regulatory cost hits American families for about $15,000 a year. That's the highest cost on your budget than anything other than housing. It's no surprise, though. It's no surprise that when 1 out of 5 American children are on food stamps, because 1 out of 10 American workers are either unemployed, underemployed, or just so discouraged they quit looking for work. And I'm going to say this quite plainly. The unemployment rate is a sham. It leaves millions of American workers uncounted. And if the Republican Party doesn't take a stand for these uncounted Americans, who will? The answer's not to expand the welfare state. It's to build the freedom state. And I happen to know it can happen because we did it in my home state. And our formula was simple. You control the taxes and the spending, you provide smart regulations, you develop an educated workforce, and you stop lawsuit abuse at the courthouse. In my 14 years as governor, we helped to create almost 1/3 of all the private sector jobs in America. In the last 7 years, we created 1.4 million jobs. You take those jobs out of the equation, minus those jobs created in Texas, this country lost 250,000 jobs. It's time to bring economic revival to every state in America with policies that limit government instead of expanding it. Now here's the third point. I've never been more certain than I am today that America's best days remain in front of us. The weakness and incompetence of our government shouldn't be confused with the strength, the ingenuity, and the idealism of the American people. Our experiment in Republican form of government, it's too durable to be sidetracked by one confused administration. You think about it, we've survived worse. We had a civil war in this country. We had 2 world wars. We had a Great Depression. We even survived Jimmy Carter. We will survive the Obama years too. There's nothing wrong with America that cannot be fixed with new leadership. You see, I see an America where a skilled worker can find a job, where wages are on the rise and freedom's on the march. An America where opportunity is the birthright of all, not dispensed by a government to a few select ones. It is time. It is time for America to lead the world. It's time to stand with our allies. It's time to pursue an America worthy of our founders' ideas. It's time that we build an America where our citizens and their children can dream again. So let's roll up our sleeves, let's go to work, and let's revive this great nation again. God bless you. Thank you for being with us here today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, fellas. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. Thank you. Thanks for being with us. Thank
Governor Perry, we have a few questions for you, if you don't mind. Thank you for speaking.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank
Glad
you
you're
for
on a
speaking
box.
So clearly. That was truly incredible, so thank you. A few questions we've gotten on Twitter. What would you do in the White House about illegal immigration?
Well, obviously, addressing this, I've had a little bit more than just to talk about it, had to deal with it. And I think that's one of the major issues that we've got with Washington and Congress, is that they talk and people literally die. Because we've had to deal with this issue last summer when there were literally tens of thousands of individuals showing up, some of them unaccompanied minors on that southern border. I had to make a decision on how to deal with that, because not only my state, but the country was being impacted by it. And the president asked me to come and meet with him on an airport ramp. And I told him, I'd be glad to do it, Mr. President, but I want to meet with you and talk to you about this issue of our border. We met, and it became abundantly clear to me that he was not going to address this issue. That's when I told him, I said, Mr. President, if you don't secure this border, Texas will, and that's exactly what we did. We sent the National Guard there to secure the border, and that's the point. If you do not secure the border first, you can't have a conversation about immigration reform. That's just the fact. You don't trust Washington to deal with this. I don't trust Washington to deal with this until they secure the border. And we know how to do this. We can show them how to do it. We've had a 74% decrease in the number of apprehensions in that 150-mile region of the border by deploying our National Guard, by putting the law enforcement there. I will suggest one more thing, and that is aviation assets that look down 24/7, give us the information with fast response teams, and we can secure the border. At that particular point in time, then you have a conversation of how to deal with this entire immigration issue. There are a lot of interesting ideas on the table out there, but not until we secure the border first.
Thank you, Governor Perry. What about, there's lots of talk of climate change. How would you, as U.S. President, if you were to run, how would you secure America's energy future?
Let me address this issue. I think there's some good examples of how to deal with our environment. As a matter of fact, during the last 14 years, Texas added 5.6 million people to its population rolls. 1.4 million jobs created in that 7-year period of time, 07 through 14. 5.7 million people, that's lots of cars on the roads in Texas. During that same period of time, using thoughtful, incentive-based regulations, we decreased our nitrogen oxide levels, which, by the way, is a real pollutant. It's a real emission. Nitrogen oxide levels were down by 62.5%. Ozone levels were down by 23%. Sulfur dioxide levels down by 50%. And our CO2 levels were down. Whether you believe in this whole concept of climate change or not, CO2 levels were down by 9% in that state. Isn't that the goal of what we were working towards? And the point is, you can have job creation and you can make your environment better. And that ought to be the role of those 50 states, of being able to put policies into place, incentive-based policies. We put policies in place that helped remove old, dirty, burning diesel engines from the fleets. We were able to transition our electrical power system into the natural gas burning. I mean, that ought to be our goal in this country. And it all starts with energy policy. Open up the XL pipeline. Create energy jobs in this country. That needs to be what we're working on in this country from the standpoint of creating the jobs and making America more energy secure.
Thank you, Governor Perry. We appreciate you speaking so plainly on this, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you. God bless you all. Thank you.